So this session is Declarative Shadow DOM in the future of Drupal theming. My Drupal core CSS co-maintainer, Mike Herschel, is giving a talk in the other room that is also about the future of Drupal theming. It's the future of Drupal theming, AI, Drupal, Canvas, and beyond. He mentioned AI, that's why I'm in the little room. But we actually talked about this, and what he's talking about is like 2026 Drupal theming, and I'm talking about 2027, so we're all good. My name is Johnalbin, and I've been around and done a lot of stuff because I've been around for a lot of years. This session is actually my second presentation on web components, but the first one was in 2014. There was a DrupalCon and web components were very new, and I was like, hey, we should look at this for core because it looks really interesting. And we had a discussion of it, and somebody said, hey, have you heard of this thing called React.js? And then I became a React developer for 10 years. So, but the reason why now? Why am I talking about web components again? Is because of something that just recently happened. I don't know if you've seen this on Can I Use or like Mozilla Developer Network. There's a new thing called Baseline, and it shows like whether or not you can use a particular CSS property or JavaScript API or HTML element or whatever. If a particular CSS or HTML thing is only implemented in like one or two browsers, but not all the browsers, it'll be called limited availability. Once it finally gets added to all the major browsers, it's called newly available, and they'll usually put like the date of when that happens. And then 2.5 years after it first becomes newly available, a feature is then called widely available. And this thing that I'm going to be talking about today, Declarative Shadow DOM, became newly available in August 2024, which means that it will be widely available beginning of 2027. So that's why I'm talking about it now. So everything old is new. We have been doing PHP server-side renders forever, right? That's how Drupal got started. There's been a new thing that happened a couple years ago where React.js realized that doing all of this stuff in the client browser is kind of slow because you have to load all the stuff, and so they figured out how to do some server rendering. So they have this new server components, client components, and the even newer school is PHP server-side rendering again. But this pattern that React.js uses is something that I've seen come up a few times called split components. So you have one part which is a server part with no client-side JavaScript, and then another part is the client part with all of your JavaScript that adds behaviors and stuff like that. And it's also called progressive enhancement. Like that's what that is. React.js can finally do progressive enhancement. But this split component pattern in 2023, only React could do it compared to web components. Web components did not have a server-side rendering solution. If you wanted to use web components, you couldn't create one unless you did it with some JavaScript, right? But then 2024, and now we have Declarative Shadow DOM, and that's the server-side rendering of web components. Does everybody know what like web components are and all the APIs and stuff? You're all nodding your heads. This is very bad. I'm going to go through all of this stuff because it's complicated and not a lot of people have like hands-on experiment. They don't know what it is, but they've never built anything with it. So I've got a 95% working demo here that I want to talk about. And now I have to do this fancy thing so that it doesn't screw up the recording. Now I can do the demo. Okay. Oh, which is in the browser. Okay. So, first thing we're going to talk about is the custom elements API. I did this presentation about a month ago, sort of tested it out, but I wasn't really happy with the demo. I wanted to have a custom element that actually really did something interesting and like useful. So this custom element is a light dark mode selector. Like this is fully functional. So you can switch on dark mode. You can make it force it into light mode, and this works with the OS's ability. So if you're in auto here and just switch the OS's dark mode, it also plays with it. I did a very old school Johnalbin thing where in order to do this demo, I created a whole new project on Drupal.org. If you've used Olivero in Drupal core, it doesn't have a dark mode. This is a sub-theme of it because Mike's CSS is so good, it was like really easy to create this. But now you can use it. I'll be using it on my site because I already use Olivero on my website. So that's what this does, but let's take a look at the actual APIs so you can see specifically what it does. Here's the HTML. You can see that it essentially looks like a made-up HTML tag. This is an ability that every single browser since the beginning of browsers has been able to do because they know that somebody's going to create a new tag later and whatever version just came out won't know what it is, so they're just going to not style it, but they will show all of the children contents, right? And you can apply CSS to this, made-up HTML tag. The custom elements API sort of formalizes that and adds an extra ability onto that. Not only can you apply CSS, but you can automatically apply JavaScript. So when the browser sees this tag, if you've registered this element with the browser, it'll automatically run some JavaScript on this particular tag. Let's look at that JavaScript. So we're just creating a new toggle color scheme element that extends a regular old HTML element. And let me smush this. There we go. Once we've created that class, we call custom elements.define, say what the tag actually is, and then give it the class there. That's all we need to do in order to register to that. And again, anytime the browser, once this line of JavaScript is run, anytime the browser sees a toggle color scheme element, it'll run this JavaScript on it. And the really nice thing about this, compared to all of our Drupal code, is the word this, since it's being run on the element itself, the keyword this, it already knows which element that it's applying to. So this query selector, we're just looking for children of this particular element, right? And that means that I'm not going to switch my presentation mode. This is going to be, so I don't have to do the weird button thing. I'm just going to show you this. Here we go. That means with custom elements defined, you won't have to use Drupal behaviors anymore because Drupal behaviors looks for all of the things that are like this and then decides whether or not it's done it before and then initializes it, right? You don't have to do any of that because the class will do that for you. Right? This is pretty nice. So inside I should probably show you a little bit more about what this class does. It has a regular constructor. You call it the super function so that it calls the HTML elements constructor. And then there's a connected callback function. And this function is called anytime the element is actually added to the DOM. So when it sees it, it's already in the DOM, it'll call this, after it calls the constructor, it'll call this connected callback function. And in this case, we're just we're checking the local storage to see if we've already switched to a different color mode. We're doing queries on child elements, super easy. And then we're just storing the color scheme back into local storage. Yeah. It's pretty simple. Pretty simple custom element. Then the next thing I want to talk about after custom elements API are templates and slots. Now, template of slots are literally, there's a new HTML element called template, and there's a new HTML element called slot. By themselves, they're not that useful, which I'll show you. But one of the interesting things about the template element, let me go, next demo, nope. Yeah, I already did the slides. Okay, here we go. One of the interesting thing about the template element, inside this little red box there is a template printed there. So if we inspect inside that dash red, there's a template, but by default, it doesn't get displayed. This is the default behavior for the template element in every single browser. It's part of the spec. And that means that you can put the template in there once and then like reuse it on your page. Unfortunately, the just templates of slots, that means you have to do all of this like finding the template using get element ID, then you start looking for the slots that are inside it. It's all a lot of DOM API that you don't want to do, which is why templates and slots by themselves, not really that useful, but I went ahead and implemented this so that it'll grab the template, it'll stuff some content into those slots, and then clone it into the DOM so we can reuse it. You can see that here. We're going to clone the template, clone again, and you can see it's modifying, it's using different content each time it's cloned it. That's what they do. Not that useful by itself. But then we look at shadow DOM. With the shadow DOM, things change a little bit. Let's look at the shadow DOM JavaScript. So this, oh yeah, let me show you the functionality. So this is a flip card design. It's got an image on one side. It has some text on the other side. There's a HTML attribute. Where is it? Oh, not on that one. There's an HTML attribute where image left that defines which side the image is on. And just for giggles, I added a little button here that does flip, and then you can flop it back. Whatever. Whatever. Yeah, so that's what the custom element does. The shadow DOM custom element does. And you can see that flip card is basically the same thing as what I was showing you with the color toggle scheme element. It's got a constructor, connected callback. This is all part of the custom elements API. Again, we're calling custom elements define on the flip card element and giving it the flip card class. And the difference comes in our constructor. Because we're going to attach a shadow DOM to this element during the constructor. And if you've ever inspected a video element, you'll see this weird slightly grayed out area where the play button is and where the media goes, and it's all embedded inside a single video tag. That's shadow DOM, right? So let me show you what that looks like. So here's right there is a shadow DOM that we've attached, and you can inspect it and see all the different divs that I added in there and the slots that I've added in here, and that's all inside the shadow DOM. And that works because we're attaching it here during the constructor. So this is the version where you have to use JavaScript. I'm going to show you that one first. And in the connected callback, which again runs when the element is attached to the DOM, it's going to find our flip card template, and then it's going to stuff that template into the shadow root append child, and then stuff the template in there. Let's take a look at the markup again. Did I show the markup? Yeah. So inside this shadow DOM enabled custom elements, I've got a paragraph, and then I've got an image, and then I've got a heading, right? And this image is using the image slot. So I've defined a slot inside my template where images go. And as long as I add the attribute slot equals image, it'll go into that specific slot. And then I did the same way with my heading. There's a heading slot. I'm inserting this entire H2 into that slot. And then this paragraph doesn't have any slot specified, which means it will go into the default slot. And the default slot is literally, see here's the heading slot. It has a name of heading. The default slot does not have a name. So it's just whatever unnamed slot, that's the default slot. This is why templates and slots are useful, right? They weren't useful by themselves, but with Shadow DOM, now they're useful.
Wow.
What was that?
What is the scroll up a bit, just to see where, if that was the same container that contains the...
Sorry, what do you want me to scroll up to?
Scroll up a bit in this code.
Oh yeah, so yeah, I grabbed the template and then I cloned it into the Shadow DOM. So this markup inside is the same as the template here. Is that what you wanted to see? It's a little bit trippy.
We saw the elements on the top level that would go into the slot, and later we see the thing that has the slots in them, and that was
so
confused.
Yeah. This is reasonable. Let me open the twig file so you can see the HTML a little bit clearer. Shadow DOM.twig. This one. Okay. So we've got a template. Scroll down after the template. And then here we're using the flip card, and all we're specifying is the flip card and the paragraph and the image and the H2. Like, that's it. But because we registered this custom element with the DOM, it runs it and attaches the Shadow DOM and clones the template in it, and the template has all the slots in it, and we're using the slots inside our markup, and that's how it works. That makes sense now? Hopefully. Yeah, so this is Shadow DOM, but you see that I'm using JavaScript, right? But we want to server-side render that. And next demo, that's what declarative Shadow DOM is. I actually turned off the JavaScript on this page. Like this button doesn't work, little flip doesn't flip because I turned off all the JavaScript. I can sort of prove it by going into the console here, reloading. See there, it prints out no JavaScript was run on this page, right? Except for the console log, which printed that out. So let's see how this actually works. Oh, wait. I want to show you the element. So prove that it really does. There. See, it has a Shadow DOM. We didn't use any JavaScript, but it already has a Shadow DOM, and it's inserting the content into those places, into those slots in the template. So it's created a Shadow DOM. The Shadow DOM is full of a template, and everything works. No JavaScript is being run. The only thing that doesn't run is the client-side behavior, like this button doesn't run because I haven't run any JavaScript yet. Let's take a look how this works in the actual HTML. Let me close that file. Which is declarative Shadow DOM, this one. Okay. This is going to be really verbose, and you're going to be like, oh my god, I don't want to use this, but relax. we're going to have a solution for the verbosity of this. The way declarative Shadow DOM works, you can see we have flip card again. Here's the contents. We're specifying the slots. It's all the same, but the first child element is a template that has a shadow root mode of open, and the template is like the entire template. So like we've got some CSS in there, let's go down, and then like all of our divs and slots and everything. And that means that every time we want to use that flip card, we have to include another copy of the same template as the child of the custom element flip card. Why does it keep doing that? That's the verbose part, right? Instead of having one copy of the template, each element has to have a copy of the template. Fortunately, there is a fix for that because we use Drupal. Let me show you. Oh, one thing is different when you're using declarative shadow DOM. The browser creates the shadow DOM when it parses that whole chunk of markup, and it will remove the template from the DOM and then shove it in the shadow DOM, right? So that means inside my JavaScript, I can't just run attach shadow because the shadow is already attached. If you run attach shadow and it already has, a shadow DOM on it, it'll go, oh, okay, and it'll dump out the contents of that shadow DOM, clean it out, and then hand it back to you, which is not really useful, right? Because you've just lost your template in this case. So you just have to check, does it already have a shadow root? And if it doesn't, then you can run attach shadow. I gotta figure out how to like turn off the help hovering thing on this app next time.
Start the presentation.
Hmm?
You might start the presentation mode in PHP store.
This is presentation mode.
This is?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Where is it? Code view. Yeah, it's in there. It's running right now. Appearance, presentation mode. The other thing that we need to do is normally, so if a browser doesn't support declarative shadow DOM, which all of them do, all of the major ones do right now, but we're going to have some backwards compatibility in here, in case you have some weird browser that doesn't have declarative shadow DOM. Normally, we're going to look for the template and then clone that and put it in the shadow DOM. The other bit that we have to do is because the template is a child of this element, we're just doing a this query selector, so it'll grab me the template that's in here. But since we were using declarative shadow DOM, remember I said it yanked the template out of the light DOM and then put it in the shadow DOM, which means that this query will return nothing because the template's not there anymore. So we just have to check to see if we actually found a template before we clone it and append it to the shadow DOM. Those are the two things that you need to do differently in your JavaScript because we're using declarative shadow DOM. Otherwise, this JavaScript file is exactly the same as before. Adding an event listener, How are we doing for time? Okay, good. The other bit that I didn't talk about yet is observed attributes. Normally your HTML element, if the attributes on that element are changed in the DOM, nothing's going to happen really because it's already been run. But you can tell the browser, hey, anytime the image attribute on this element is changed, let's fire up a new function. And that new function is called attribute changed callback. And in this case, it's going to give us the name of the attribute, which is image in this case, the old value, and what the new value is. And we just double check that it's the image attribute that's being changed, and then there's a sort of a method here that just sets the button text from flip to flop. Yeah, that's all it does. And that's why, since on this particular demo, the JavaScript wasn't running, you can see that flip, it should say flop there, but The only way I'm changing that is with JavaScript, but I'm not writing JavaScript here. So that's the one difference on this particular demo. But we can even fix that problem using SDC. But before we get to that, I think I got one more. Yes, back to your slide, Sean. Okay, there we go. Let's talk about Shadow DOM and CSS, because CSS works quite a bit differently inside the Shadow DOM. I was having a hard time figuring out how I'm going to diagram this, because like the Shadow DOM is like behind the light DOM, and so I want you to imagine that I'm taking a website and I'm sort of rotating it 90 degrees. Oh, I gotta do the stop button. Okay, so I want you to imagine that we're taking a site and rotating it 90 degrees. On the right-hand side, we have the light DOM, and then we also have the shadow DOM. This element is like the body element, and anything that we add to the body is just like a child element, right? So like this is the way I'm going to diagram this particular explanation, right? When you add a custom element with just the custom elements API, this element is still in the light DOM. But when we call attach shadow, it gets pulled into a new root that is in the shadow DOM, and it is completely separate from the light DOM. Each custom element will have its own shadow root, and the CSS from your light DOM does not apply at all to the shadow DOM, which means you need to like write CSS that fixes your custom element all inside the shadow DOM. The shadow DOM is the same as regular DOM, so we can use a template to put things into the shadow DOM. We can just use regular DOM APIs where we put things into the shadow DOM. Slots work a little bit differently, because when we define a slot and put something inside the slot, the slotted element is in the light DOM. So the slot is in the shadow DOM, but its contents are in the light DOM. It works a little differently than regular CSS, yes. And there's some good news, because there's a little bit of communication we can do between, and the first is with custom properties. Every single custom property that you define in the light DOM, as long as like it's defined on the element or any parent element, will be available inside the shadow DOM. And you can write your CSS to look at those values and decide how you want to actually, use that CSS, to use that value in your shadow DOM CSS. This is pretty powerful, and it's a really interesting way of writing CSS. The other thing is you can go the other way a little bit for inside your shadow DOM CSS. You can use this selector, slotted div, that'll find the div that is part of the slotted content. Right? So if we add a div to that slot, we can select it in our CSS using this particular CSS selector. But it does have a limitation, because it only selects that parent element. If there are child HTML elements like this box here with the white box with the green border, the CSS won't apply to it at all, which can be a little frustrating if you have like an unordered list or an ordered list, because you can only apply styles to the OL and the UL, but you cannot apply it to the LI. A little bit frustrating. The workaround, of course, is just one more. There we go. The workaround is, since this is in the light DOM, we can use regular CSS to apply it. This is just a normal CSS selector. We're applying it to custom elements, and then just to a particular div in there, right? So that's the workaround. And it can feel a little tricky trying to navigate all these rules. and I haven't gone through all of the rules yet. So there's some edge cases in here, and I can understand why people don't want to do this. Again, this is shadow DOM components. People that don't want to have to deal with all of that headache have started using what's called light DOM components. This is not a term that I came up with. It's people in the industry, web development industry have come up with it. They don't use templates. They don't use shadow DOM. They just use custom elements. That's it. They just use custom elements API. So they're applying JavaScript to custom elements, HTML elements. If we compare light DOM components to shadow DOM components, the server part is declarative shadow DOM on one side and custom elements only on the light DOM side. So like that's server-side rendering already. And then in the browser, we use attached shadow for shadow DOM components, and on the client side for light DOM components, we just use custom elements define. That's it. So why would you choose the light? The first obvious one is that there's less CSS drama. It's standard CSS cascade that we've been using for 25 years. Hopefully none of you have been using it for 25 years like I have, but it's well known. Right? And the second one is a known like bug inside Shadow DOM, and that there is a accessibility issue with ARIA. Right? Because ARIA attributes are attributes that go on HTML elements and tell the browser and accessibility software how to interact with all those things. And because the shadow DOM is a separate DOM from the light DOM, if you apply ARIA attributes to your shadow DOM, the accessibility software can't see it because it's in the shadow DOM. And if you have like an H2 heading and the accessibility software is like going through all the H2s, and you have an H2 in your shadow DOM, accessibility software will not see the shadow DOM H2. They are working on this issue. I don't know when they're going to fix it or if they're fix it. But I would suggest that if you use declarative shadow DOM components, that you make sure that you don't put like headings into your shadow DOM. You can still have them be slotted content. So like you can have an H2 that's slotted into a shadow DOM because that's still in the light DOM. And any form elements, again, you would want to put the form elements in the slots and not in the shadow DOM. And that will sort of work around this ARIA issue, which is pretty significant. Okay. We've got 5 more minutes, I think, before I do some questions. And I'm going to do single directory web components, which you can either do light DOM components or declarative shadow DOM components. I'm going to show you a declarative shadow DOM component, and I have to do the button trick again. Back on. So let's show you a SDC component. We have added variants. This is a new feature of SDC that just landed. We're going to define a primary variant. It like basically changes the color if you've set the primary flag on your SDC components. The props are the image side that it goes on, the heading tag, whether it's an H2 or an H3, and then there are some slots. There's an image slot, a heading slot, and a content slot. And let me show you what the twig looks like. So we're doing a little bit of housekeeping in the front here. I'm going to skip past that. We have our custom elements, and we're printing out Drupal attributes on it. And our template using shadow root mode open, and the entire template is here. One of the things that we're going to do that's a little bit of trick we can do because we're using SDC and Twig is instead of like inlining our CSS, I like having separate CSS files because linting reasons, right? So I've created a helper Twig file that just links to a set of CSS that I want applied to all of my custom components. Like, for example, the thing that always bites me in the ass is that images don't have a max width of like 100% by default. You have to add that to your base CSS, and you've been doing it for like 10 years, right? But in the Shadow DOM, that rule does not exist, so I want to import it in every single one of my custom elements. So we can just link to it. And because if we've also linked to this CSS file in our light DOM, the browser doesn't have to refetch it. It's already got a cache copy. It just uses the same copy, no extra network calls or anything like that. And then I added a little helper here where we pass in the special component metadata variable that's available in every single STC component. And that component metadata variable has a path in there, and that means I can create a shadow.css file. That is the separate file, and I just have created a convention where every single one of my components, flip guard, every single one of my components, here's the component YAML, the CSS, the JavaScript, the twig file, I have a shadow.css file. So this is the shadow DOM CSS for this STC component. And let me close this up. Because we're using Twig, like we're using server-side rendering it, so that awkward bit where we had to include the template in every single version of our custom element, well, we just have it in one place. It's inside this flipcard.twig file. So every time we use the flipcard STC component, it's automatically inserting the template. So here I'm inserting another flipcard. I don't have to worry about the template being reproduced because it's already in the twig file. So let's see here. Templates, yeah. And the trickiest bit here, I think, is I'm using the heading tag property of STC when it's going to default to H2, and I'm adding a slot property to it. So this is going to be in the light DOM. This heading is going to be in the light DOM, and it's going to go in the heading slot. So you need to make sure that when you are using Twig and you're trying to add content to your component, make sure you're adding it inside the part that is going to be light DOM and not, because technically you could print it out here, but then that heading's in the shadow DOM because it's part of your template, and you don't want that. So, and then we just create, this is like the default slot here again, because you just have a paragraph. You can add on any sort of content into this slot, and it'll go in the default slot. And then here we have our image slots in our image slot, our image slot in the custom element and our image slot in the Twig template. And I think that might be everything in my demo. Yeah, well, here this is us calling this particular instance of the flip card is using the primary variant. We're creating attributes on this particular element, specifying the image side, and then printing out like Drupal fields and putting them into various Twig blocks, right? So this is how you use SDC to put things into your custom element slots. It's pretty straightforward, and it's pretty cool. Let me show you what that looks like in the browser, and then, no, I already did that one. This one. Okay. This is the Twig implementation, the Twig call where I specified that it is a primary variant. You can see it's using different colors. I did a little bit of a hacky thing here just to show you how it works. And that was a bit that I skipped at the top here. When the variant is primary, I'm gonna add a style attribute. Don't do this. But it is, so that means on this custom element, I'm adding a style attribute and I'm setting these custom properties from the light DOM part of the file, and then those custom properties go into the shadow DOM, and then they're used in the shadow DOM's CSS. Don't do it this way. But it proves that this color, color primary 50, this is again from Olivero's CSS, it goes into the shadow DOM. The shadow DOM decides it's going to use that color, and there it is. So I can change that. I can change that color actually right here. Man, I hope this works. Let's do pink. There. Right. And I believe that is everything. Thank you very much. I put all of these slides already up on my website, so you can see a copy of them, and eventually they'll put a copy of the video online, and I will link to it from the same spot. Go ahead.
I don't know if I need a microphone or I'm just, yeah, okay. Okay, so I am not accustomed with React at all, so there's a big chance I'm going to sound like a complete idiot now, but it's fine. I cannot get my head around, it feels like it's reinventing what Twig does. So you have extends, you have includes, you have interval to attach libraries like the style tags, the link styles you did, and I don't really know what my question is. It feels like you're not you, but it feels like it is reinventing what we use in Twig.
It's really similar, honestly. And I'm positive that the inspiration was from the HTML spec into Twig and not the other way around. But yes, they're essentially the same thing. They're called slots in Twig because they're called slots in the HTML spec, right? So they're really similar. If you just want to use light DOM, you can. That's just Twig, right? If you want to add custom elements API because you're tired of Drupal once and Drupal behaviors, just add that to your to the Twig. That's the other thing. So flipcard.js file. So inside my component, when this Twig file gets printed out inside our page, SDC is going to make sure that the JavaScript is loaded and make sure that the CSS is loaded, which is quite nice because the JavaScript is where you're going to add any custom elements calls, right? So you could just use SDC with custom elements just by putting the custom elements define inside that JS file. But if you want to do shadow DOM, then you got to add in all the extra bits.
I guess I just don't understand what is the point of this shadow DOM here, but I will talk to you after.
Okay.
Oh, go.
Yeah, I have a question about mixing Twig templates and JavaScript templates. So, for example, you can render the server side these 3 cards, and then using JavaScript you can receive the card number 4 using the REST request, for example. How we can use a template from the Drupal to render one more card on the front end using JavaScript. If you attach the template to each of 3 cards, can we create the card number 4 using the same template from card number 1, for example?
So are you asking inside the SDC example or just the declarative shadow DOM example?
We have template in Twig file.
Yeah, okay.
HTML template, and need to create one more element using JavaScript using the same HTML template from Twig. How to do this?
So the HTML template is going inside our Twig file.
Yeah.
Right? And if we're going to create elements using JavaScript, the SDC is going to make sure that flipcard.js is loaded automatically, and you can. The one thing that you can't do in the constructor is because it is this flip card class is being run on the element the first time the browser sees it, the browser doesn't know about the children yet, so you can't search for children inside the constructor. You have to wait until the connected callback to search for children. So that's where you would also have to wait to add extra things into your template, or maybe even into the light DOM.
So to render like card number 4 using JavaScript, you should create the invisible template div that should be cloned by JavaScript, right?
Yes, depending on how you wrote your JavaScript and whether or not you're doing whether you're doing declarative chat to DOM. Yeah.
The question is why we should have 3 templates instead of originally 1 template. If you have 3 similar cards, why we should 3 times put it to the HTML?
So this template is the HTML element template, right?
Yeah.
And it's got the scaffolding of like what our grid system is, and specifies what the slots are. This is just the way that HTML templates and HTML slots work. Outside of the template, but inside the custom element, you specify the content and you tell it which slot it goes into. That's just the way the spec is written. So, yeah.
Couldn't Twig just do that out of the box? Like that's what I'm confused about. I don't know.
Actually, I don't know where I saw it, but maybe that would help like clearing up some questions. You mentioned, I don't know where I read it, whether it's in the app or, but you said it will replace the app.
Oh, yeah.
So-
I did say that. I
So
should have.
how can that happen? I think that would help.
So, I mean, React is a library, right? So it's extra. It's going to be extra JavaScript that's run, but this JavaScript is using APIs. Sorry, the React will have to write its own APIs, and you'll have to have all the JavaScript for running those APIs. That's all loaded in as extra JavaScript. But since we're calling vanilla JavaScript APIs, we're calling DOM APIs, they're built into the browser. They're going to be way faster than React ever can be. And eventually, we'll be using either light DOM components if the shadow DOM part is crazy, making it crazy, or shadow DOM components. It'll replace React.
Okay, we need to keep the room to the next speaker so we can continue the discussion outside.
Yeah, I'm going to be around, so go ahead and ask me whatever you want.